Really a fantastic event prepared today, really dedicated to remembering and honoring John Lewis and urging Democrats abroad members like you to make good, necessary trouble to fight for voting rights in the United States. We have an impressive roster of speakers for you, and there will be time to take your questions too. And at the core of this event, we're all going to learn what each of us can do to oppose the wave of voter suppression that is going on in America at the moment and to carry John Lewis's legacy forward. For those of you who might not be as familiar with Democrats Abroad, we are the official arm of the Democratic Party for the approximately 9 million US citizens living outside the United States. And it's our goal to mobilize these Americans, just like you, and to allow us to have a voice in the democratic process happening back home. If you aren't yet a member, I encourage you to join, and there will be a link placed in the chat box shortly where you can do so. A little bit more about Democrats Abroad. We are especially proud of what we did in delivering the winning margins for President Biden in the 2020 election cycle, the vital states of Arizona and Georgia, and again in the runoff to get Senator Jon Ossoff elected. We'll hear from Democratic leaders in both of these states today, and really at the core of this, it becomes more and more visible that your votes as voters abroad really do count, and they make the critical difference time and time again. Georgia brings us back to the late Congressman John Lewis, who we are honoring today on the first anniversary of his passing. He was a special friend to Democrats abroad, as you will soon hear, and we all want to carry forward his legacy of defending voting rights for all Americans. Before we begin, I'd really like to thank the committee for organizing this event and a little bit about today and how it came into being. We as Democrats abroad, the leaders of Democrats abroad, passed what we call resolutions at our annual meetings. And one of these resolutions was introduced out of our committee in Canada. And I'd really like to give a huge shout out to Ken Sherman in Canada, Lizette Wright in Canada, Steve Nardi, Julie Buchanan for spearheading this, and for everyone else who helped out at later stages, Katie Solon, Angela Fobbs, and my fellow vice chair, Art Shankler, Meredith Wheeler in France. And I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but it has been a fantastic committee, and really hats off to them for putting this together, and all of the speakers, all of the content to honor John Lewis today and motivate us to keep continuing our work. President Biden recently, as you may have seen, stood up and spoke out on voting rights a few days ago in a major speech that he delivered in Philadelphia, the home of American democracy. He issued a powerful call to action, and that is why we are all here now. The vote is sacred in our democracy, yet Republicans are seeking to limit who can cast a vote. Under the guise of securing our voting systems, the GOP is seeking to weed out Democratic voters, particularly people of color and young voters who are thought to vote more likely for the Democrats. 17 states with Republican majorities have enacted, not just proposed, but enacted 28 new laws to make it harder for US citizens to vote. There are nearly 400 more bills of that kind that Republicans are introducing all across the country in state legislatures. President Biden described it as a 21st century attempt at Jim Crow and the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. So please commit today to do your part to oppose these forces, and stay with us as we hear from this impressive roster of speakers who can say a little bit more about how you can do just that. And if you feel inspired by this, please contribute to our Get Out the Vote Fund in honor of John Lewis. Democrats Abroad is an entirely volunteer-run and donation-funded organization, and we really do depend on generous contributions from people like you to keep doing our important work. We hope that everyone present will donate 1965 cents in honor of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which John Lewis did so much to bring about. Here to tell us a little bit more about the full program is our Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus Chair, Angela Fobbs. Angela, would you go ahead now and give us a full rundown of the program?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are. Today, we have our program in 3 parts. The first part is we're going to have people who interacted with John Lewis, have known John Lewis, and want to express their gratitude for everything that he's done. The second part, we're going to hear from some people who are in Texas Democrats, West Virginia Democrats, and Arizona Democrats, and other people who work on voting rights issues to give us an update on exactly where we are. and it's not in a good place. And the third part of our event, we're going to have discussion and information on what you can do to help and how you can help overseas to make this event a good event forever, to make us all have voting rights once again, instead of them being taken away. I think we'd like to start with a message that was sent to us by John Lewis in 2014, if I have that right. It's a great video that he made for us. So here we go.
My beloved sisters and brothers living abroad, this election is important. Oh, this midterm election is very important. It may be the most important election of our lifetime. If we want to continue to move forward and not go backward, we have to vote. We have to participate. We need you to turn out and vote like we never voted before. Vote for full employment. Vote to protect the environment and save this little planet for generation yet unborn. We need you. You may be living abroad, but you can help determine what happened in your country, what happened to the women, to children, to those who have been left out and left behind. It is your calling, it is your mission, it is your obligation to get out there and participate. Your vote will count, and it must count to help make America better for all of our citizens, but no one will be left out or left behind. The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. I don't need to tell you, it is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. Thank you very much.
So, the late, great Congressman John Lewis, in his own words, everybody vote, especially if you're in New Jersey or Virginia and you have, or any of the other states. I think Ohio and Texas have special elections. Please do go to votefromabroad.org and request your absentee ballot. Every vote counts, always. Next, we're going to hear from Christina Sofsgaard. She is the chair of Democrats Abroad Norway, and she has a very touching interaction that she'd like to share with us that she had with John Lewis when he visited Norway, and also when they visited him on a door knock. Christina, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Angela. In the fall of 2011, John Lewis received a prize from the Peace Research Institute in Oslo for his recognition in the work he has done for the struggle for civil rights. During this short visit, he made time to meet with the members of Democrats Abroad at a local cafe. The event was open to all DA members, so you can imagine how full that little cafe became. The DA Norway ex-con decided to have a dinner for John Lewis, and we did that at our chair's home because she did have such a lovely dining room. And while she was at the ceremony, I was preparing dinner for John Lewis. In the meantime, he had also visited the Peace Institute, the Nobel Institute, and there he saw a photograph. And we thought, wonder what kind of a present he would like from us, because he was so generous with his time, offering to meet with our members. And we thought maybe we'd buy him a cheese slicer or a Norwegian sweater, but no, he wanted a photograph he'd seen at the Nobel Peace Institute. So we called down there and we found out that that photograph cost $5,000 to get reduplicate. Well, DA Norway didn't have $5,000, but we did have friends there. So when we told them it was for John Lewis, they gave us a better price. We presented that photograph to him at the dinner table. And I had no idea at the time that he was so onto photographs, which we found out at his office. And now you can start the slideshow, Angela, if you'd like. And there, when we visited his DC at the door knock, we saw, he invited us, by the way, to visit him. We saw in his office, as you can see, that it was just loaded with pictures. Next slide, please. The little photograph just above my head is the one that we gave him. Next slide, please. There you can see Martin Luther King receiving the Peace Prize from the King of Norway. His chief of staff, Michael Collins, informed me that he was so proud of that picture that he wanted to hang that particular photograph himself. So he asked for a nail, a hammer, and a ladder, and he hung up that picture himself. So then he proceeded, next slide please, to tell us the story of his life through these photographs. He told us of how he'd been spit upon, how he'd been beaten, how he had, next slide, how he had marched, how he crossed the bridge, next slide. And then he gave 2 hours of his time to Democrats abroad, 2 hours, to show us, to be with us, and to share with us. He was so giving. Next slide, please. We took pictures of us inside and out, outside. Next slide. And I would just like to end with this quote and pass it on to the next person who's going to tell you a little bit more how this generous man, we can pay him back. So, and it's us that have to pay him back. And if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Thank you, and sharing my little story. And thank you to the next person for taking over.
All right. Our next speaker, Ken, would you like to introduce Mayor Perkins? You're on mute still.
Is James Perkins in the audience? Just want to make sure he.
Yes.
Yes, I'm present.
Great. James, welcome to this global meeting. I know you've served 2 terms as mayor from 2000 to 2008, and recently have been reelected here in 2020 as your pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, along with your duties as mayor. You taught math and computer science at Salem University. That you're an activist, voting rights in the 60s, segregation in the 70s, technology education in the 80s and 90s, environmental justice and voter participation in this century. Your activism is outstanding. You have served as president of the National Conference of Black Mayors, 650. Belong to that conference. You are director of the National League of National League of Cities. I don't know if you retain that position now. People have described you as prayerful, persistent, passionate, practical. You care about people and you're dedicated to solving problems. To God be the glory has been the affirmation of your life. We welcome you here and we look forward in the years to come as we do annual voting rights days to come back and share with us the agenda of the year. God bless.
Thank you, Kenneth. I am in Selma, so let me welcome all of you abroad to Selma. And thank you, Democrats abroad, for even inviting me or considering me being a part of this very significant event. I was asked to speak just a few moments about the former Congressman John Lewis, my friend's legacy. Our relationship goes back to 1965. I was 12 years old, a student protester in the movement. And that relationship started then. John was then a young man who had gravitated toward the children in the movement and was a leader of the children's movement in Selma. I was one of those students who was walking out of school and participating in the movement. And then later on in life, I ran for mayor of the city of Selma once in 1992. Had a conversation with Congressman Lewis then about that aspiration, was not successful. Ran again in 1996, was not successful. And then on January the 21st of 1999, I was with Congressman Lewis, and he gave me an autographed copy of his book, Walking with the Wind. And we talked again. And in that book, when he autographed it, he just said, "Keep the faith, James, keep the faith." So I ran again in 2000, was successful. And a pivotal moment in our relationship was in that election. I really did not understand the full impact of being elected the first African-American mayor of the city of Selma, Alabama, but John did. And I'm going to tell you what he did. I did not, but a group of people who supported the campaign decided to give a parade celebrating that election. And it was a very large parade. And as the parade was going down the street, I knew that most of the people that were in it were local. But then I looked further down the street and I see Congressman Lewis, and as I mean, a real surprise in the parade. I believe to this day uninvited, but knew and understood the significance of what had taken place. I then immediately sent for him. He came to the balcony, stood on the balcony with me, with Dr. F.D. Reese, who was also on the balcony. That's the man you see in the profile picture behind me wearing the hat, who was a part of the front line of the march from Selma to Montgomery. And in that picture, you don't see his hands, but Dr. Reese was actually carrying the speech that Dr. King would deliver in Montgomery. And so that was a pivotal moment. In 2016, I invited John to Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church, the church that Dr. F.D. Reese, that same man, had pastored for 50 years. But I invited Congressman Lewis to be the speaker during the Jubilee weekend. He did accept graciously, was there. And while there, the Friends of the Trail presented him with the Free Thinkers Award. Thus, I conclude that his legacy could be one of walking with the wind, a courageous free thinker who actually moved beyond his fears to do things for people who he did not know. And so I leave you with that, that brief summary of explanation of my experiences with the congressman, missed dearly to this day. And I say for all of the successes he achieved, for all the challenges he experienced along the way, and for all the contributions he made to those of us who are the consequence of that entire movement that he was such a significant part of, I say to God be the glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Perkins. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Chantelle Williams. Chantelle Wong. She's had a long, distinguished career in public service. And during that period, Chantelle was a participant in some of the most significant events in our US history. Having spent the majority of her professional career in public service and in locations around the world representing the United States in key positions, she regrets not having captured those moments of significance. She retired after 23 years and begun a new journey as a photographer, where she captured a lot of moments with John Lewis. And currently, she was nominated by President Biden to be the director of the Asian Development Bank. Welcome, Chantelle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I think the time that I spent with John Lewis has been very significant and influential in my life. So what I'd like to do is show you a little video clip, and then maybe go through. I think Christina talked about his love for photos, and that's what really drew him to me and drew me to him. And what a privilege it had been to really spend the time with him in Alabama, in Selma. Good to hear about the mayor's impressions and his close relationship with John Lewis. I feel very much touched by him. So let me roll a little video clip and then maybe go over a few photos with you. And I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, let's see.
Will it allow you to share?
Yes.
There we go. Okay,
Here we
great.
go. Okay, here. Make this bigger. And I was very lucky to join John Lewis 4 years.
When you share, there's a little button about sharing the sound on your computer. So stop sharing, and so that we can hear the sound too.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hang on just a minute.
Sure.
I believe it's the first the three buttons on the right, if I remember correctly.
It's
First
down
three
at the bottom of the screen. It says share sound and optimize for video clip at the bottom of the share screen.
Ah, got it. Okay. So let me restart that video.
Right.
Share screen. And I was very lucky to join
No?
4 years.
Your screen isn't shared.
Can you hear?
Your screen isn't shared.
My screen isn't.
Yes.
My screen isn't sharing now. Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Try it
Sorry about
again.
that. Try it again. And I was very lucky to join. How's that?
We still can't hear it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just unshare it and then look at the bottom of that screen, of the share screen again, and it says share sound and optimize video clip right on that same screen. It's just down at the bottom. It's kind of little.
Word. I don't know why, but okay.
It's actually before you share the screen, before you actually share it.
And I was
it's
very
right
lucky
bottom.
to join John Lewis.
Does it work?
For 4 years to be his
It's working.
photographer and videographer, thanks to an organization called the Faith and Politics Institute, where they bring members of Congress to civil rights sites in Alabama. So it's been an incredible experience for me, just because I picked up a camera It's just a very incredible opportunity, and for me to be so close to this giant of a man. I would say that he was, when he was alive, a living saint, if there was one. And to have that opportunity to not just be next to him, but the people that he surrounded himself with, the civil rights icons. So we would visit the 16th Street Baptist Church, for example. We would actually get reenactments of the 16th Street Baptist Church, the 4 little girls that were killed on that Sunday. And then we crossed the bridge with John Lewis. And I remember we did that this last time, last March. He was weak. He was definitely not himself. He was very sick. But he got on the bridge and his voice was booming. He told us what we need to do. He gave us that clarion call that we need to vote like we've never voted before. It's very emotional for me to have been there, to be part of history. And I remember that, months later, what he said about voting. I went to Georgia in December, actually. Every piece of the election was important, but Asian Americans, we were part of the margin of victory in Atlanta, and I also went out to Savannah and other parts of Georgia. After we won, we flipped the two seats, both Ossoff and Warnock. I went to visit John Lewis in his gravesite in Atlanta, and told him that this one was for him, that he told us we need to do, and we did. So that's a little bit of a video clip, and maybe I go over some photos with you as I sort of tell you a little bit about my time with him. We very, very fortunate, as Angela said, I retired after 23 years in the federal government, and I picked up a camera, started taking photos, and so happens that a friend of mine ran this organization called the Faith and Politics Institute, and John Lewis, would use that organization to lead members of Congress, basically to invite members of Congress to walk in his footstep, so that in hopes that they bring this experience on the ground back to Washington or to their home, to really understanding where we have come as a country in terms of civil rights. And so we would get on the airplane. This is very close quarters. We have a charter flight leaving Washington to go to Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery, and really visiting a lot of the civil rights sites. So let's see. It's not moving. There. This woman here is actually Governor Wallace's daughter. They have built a lot of bond over the years. She herself is a civil rights activist, but there's a special bond between them. There's such forgiveness in this particular photo that I love very much. The best part of all of this is the singing and the clapping and going to church services with John Lewis and other members of Congress. As you can see, our Vice President, not Vice President, but the Senator Dan, and the First Gentleman there joining in, and he would talk to us, lecture us. Always very intense moments with him, learning about civil rights history. This is my photo that I think Christina talked about, weeping. He does have such impact with photography and connections to photographs. This particular photo I took at the lynching memorial in front of the slave statues in Montgomery, Alabama. And I saw this scene down the hill. This is at the entrance of the lynching memorial. And I ran down the hill to take this particular photo. After that, it was just so impactful for me. I took, printed it, framed it, and gave it to his staff, Michael Collins. Somebody referred to him as his chief of staff, and gave it to him. And the staff told me that he wept when he saw this photo. And then from then on, there was this special connection that he would always seek me out every time he sees me in a distance or at a meal or whatever. He'll come and he'll ask me, "How are you doing, young lady?" And that's my special connection with John Lewis. So I talked about visiting him in his. This is a photo you just saw in the video clip, but this is when he was laying in state in Washington at the top of the Capitol steps. I got some private moments with him, and I swore to him to live the life that he has shown us, to lead the life, and that be active, get folks to go out to vote. And this is the photo that after we won Georgia, I wanted to visit him in his gravesite, and it's really interesting. I had imagined that it would be a big monument to the life of this man. Instead, I drove through what I call the hood in a very Black neighborhood of Atlanta, looking for the cemetery. Once I got to the cemetery, I was looking very hard for his gravesite, and I couldn't find it. It was very much tucked away, no big markers. It was just this very simple stone that marked John Lewis. I was able to find it because I tracked down a caretaker and said, "Where's John Lewis's gravesite?" And she said, "Go down this road, turn right, turn right." And that was how I found this gravesite. And then, of course, I talk about it today marks the anniversary of his 1 year passing. I'm feeling his embrace, and I'm remembering the lessons that he taught me about the beloved community, and this is my calling. And as I take on, hopefully with Senate confirmation coming up, as I take on this new job to represent the United States as the U.S. ambassador to the Asian Development Bank, that I take his lessons with me. So thank you for. By the way, Democrats Abroad was very significant in our flipping Georgia. So thank you for all the work that you guys do.
Thank you very much, Chantelle. Thank you so much. You have some lovely photos, and I'm so glad we had a chance to see his gravesite. I've actually never seen that, so that was very nice of you to share with us. Thanks so much for coming. We're gonna have to switch a couple of gears here for a second. Candace, if you'd like to introduce Doug Jones. I know he has some time constraints.
Sure. And thank you to all the speakers who went. Chantelle, thank you, Christina and Mayor Perkins. We're going to hear from Doug Jones now. Great. A little bit about the senator. He served as a Democratic senator in Alabama from 2018 to 2021, and he was the first Democrat to represent that deeply Republican state in the U.S. Senate in 21 years. He's a lawyer and previously served as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama. He successfully prosecuted 2 KKK members from the infamous 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, which killed 4 African-American girls. His book about that case came out in 2019 and is titled Bending Towards Justice: The Birmingham Church Bombing That Changed the Course of Civil Rights. Senator Jones has been a longtime friend to Democrats abroad, and we're really grateful for that, regularly meeting with our members in Paris, helping raise funds for all of our voter outreach efforts, and we really appreciate that. The senator now works as a political commentator for CNN and is a politics fellow at Georgetown University. Senator Jones, welcome back to Democrats Abroad. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Candace. I really appreciate it. It's great to see so many old friends. I really can't thank you enough for all the help that you gave me and what was now clearly more of an uphill battle than we even imagined. But you know what? It still was an important race in 2017 and an important race in 2020 because it still gives the hope in the South. And there's a lot of things that we got going on. I'm not out of this game yet. I may not be a candidate anymore, but there's a lot of things happening here. It's in part because of the John Lewis legacy, because today, on the first anniversary of his death, is not just a time for us to remember and honor his legacy, but it's really a call to action with everything that is happening across this country right now. Voter suppression laws are raging like wildfires across this country, and we've got to do something about that. We've got a couple of bills that are pending, as you know, H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Reauthorization Act. Those 2 bills are incredibly important. They will help stop what is going on across the country, but also help us in days and weeks and years going forward that we don't even think about. You know, as John and so many others, including people like Ronald Reagan, Republicans that have gone before this current crop of Republicans, have all stressed the right to vote and how sacred that right is and how everyone should be given free access. 1965 Voting Rights Act was passed with bipartisan support. It would not have passed but for the work of Republican leader Everett Dirksen. It was reauthorized in the past unanimously in the United States Senate. This has always been an issue where folks could work together, but times have changed. And now the Senate is a lot different. The Senate is not that functional body that it used to be. It is not the great deliberative body. It's a partisan body. And that's unfortunate because we can't always see getting things done. We're working on infrastructure right now, but the fact of the matter is voting and voting rights have become more political because people now see that that may be a way that they lose power. And that is the driving force with what we've gone on right now. When H.R. 1, and H.R. 1 does a lot of things, and I want everybody to do all you can to make sure that your voices are heard, because as you have noted, you've made the difference in so many elections across this country. And remember, you do it by mail. You're not actually voting in person. You're not actually coming to a polling place between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and doing something. There's laws that Congress passed that allows folks abroad, as well as military, to send their ballots in and be counted. And guess what? They're as secure as everything. We've got to make sure that same process is put in place in the United States. We have such lower turnout. We had record turnout this past year, but in the red states that are passing all these laws, the turnout was low. Even in Georgia, it did not hit the median and average. Even in Georgia, in Arizona and others, they're still below. What we've got to do is increase the voting participation. That involves a couple of things. Number one, we need to pass H.R. 1, but I'm going to caution folks. I'm just going to be honest. I want to caution folks. I don't want anybody to dissuade folks from their support for H.R. 1, or certainly the John Lewis voting rights. We saw the Supreme Court just recently issue another death knell to the Voting Rights Act in the Arizona case. We've got to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act reinstated. HR 1 is important. There's so many pieces of that puzzle that are so important. But I want folks to remember as this goes forward and the urgency comes forward, HR 1 doesn't really even address, even HR 1 doesn't address everything that's going on since January. HR 1 will deal with voter suppression issues. It will hit uniform standards across the country for early voting, mail-in voting, those kind of things. And that is really important. And quite frankly, I don't understand why our folks, our friends in the Republican Party don't understand that uniform voting standards across the 50 states would instill that confidence in voting that they're looking for. It would help stop voter fraud if there is any existing, which no one believes that they are. But for folks that believe that they are, uniform standards will help instill that. It will instill confidence. And we need to get that message across too. But the fact is that since January 6th, there's been a lot of laws passed that I call not suppression laws, but subversion laws, laws that will change the way courts look at contests. It will change who can contest an election, and it will make it easier for partisans to overturn the will of the people. Those laws aren't really completely addressed in HR 1. So what we've got to figure out is a way to go beyond a little bit. And what I'm looking at is something that we need to focus on, those voter suppression areas. HR 1 contains a lot of provisions, but when that bill was written, it was a great bill. But since that time, so much has happened. And we got raging wildfires across the country right now with voter suppression and voter subversion laws. And we need to craft a bill to stop those fires. We can deal with a number of things later on. I would urge everybody to talk to your members of Congress, talk to your congressional delegations, write op-eds, send social media, but do it in a way that's a proactive way, a positive way of trying to protect democracy, because that's what we're talking about here. We are talking to protect democracy through the sacred right to vote. Those are issues that I think are so important that as we go forward. Your voices are really important. Everyone understands. I can tell you from my 3 years in the United States Senate, Democrats abroad have a strong voice. You also know this. You also know that America's reputation is on the line. This is everybody across the globe is looking at what's happening in the United States right now. Democracies are a little bit in trouble across the world, and the United States of America has to lead the world in democratic institutions and that sacred right to vote. So please make sure you get out, do everything that you can to get the word out. Try to convince folks that Congress has to be the backstop. That's the issue. Whether we have to bust the filibuster or not, we've got to be the backstop. If Congress can't be the backstop for what's going on across this country right now, then quite frankly, they got no business being in Congress. That's the way I look at it. Congress is there to protect democracy, and everyone needs to step up. Let me leave you with a quote. I noticed in the film with John Lewis's message to you, he had this picture of Robert Kennedy behind, the same picture that I have had for many years. So I want to leave you not with a John Lewis quote, but with a Robert F. Kennedy quote. All of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so too are they challenging and filled with opportunity. Our world is not tranquil when it comes to democracy right now. We all know that, but it's challenging. But we can use that as an opportunity to make a democracy stronger and have more confidence from the American people. And with your help, we can do just that. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Senator, for those really insightful words. And I love what you said. Today is certainly an event honoring John Lewis, but it's also a call to action. And I really encourage every person on this call to step up and join Democrats Abroad, get active with the Democratic Party. There's so much to be done, and we appreciate you sharing these words with us so that we can continue fighting the good fight. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
All right. Great. So we're going to hear from our next speaker now and shift gears a little bit, jump to a different part of the country and hear from Natalie Tennant. Natalie is the former Secretary of State from West Virginia. She grew up on a farm in Marion County and earned her bachelor's and master's degree at West Virginia University. She served as West Virginia's 29th Secretary of State from 2009 to 2017. And during this time, she worked to modernize and streamline the Secretary of State's office, making it more efficient, transparent, and cost-effective, all the while improving services. Secretary Tennant is known as a national leader in voting rights and brought more election advancements to West Virginia than any other Secretary of State. She's worked at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU's School of Law and as a voting rights advocate, and continues to push for the passage of the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Secretary Tennant, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I'm hopeful everybody can hear me. Is that correct? I'm coming to you from West Virginia, and I tell you, it is an honor to speak to Democrats abroad. I've worked with some folks, and in some of my modernization as Secretary of State, worked to make it easier for our overseas and military voters. And that was one of the things that we led the way. And so people often ask, what's happening in West Virginia? And this really does confirm that the whole world is focused on West Virginia and on Joe Manchin. Yes, we have been talking about him for many, many months. And the country has been saying, what can we do with Joe Manchin? And this proves that the world is asking the same question too. So Democrats abroad, thank you for your strength. Thank you for your interest and the work that you may even be able to help us with here in West Virginia. And I'd like to just give you a quick lay of the land for me and for the political climate and environment in West Virginia. As she said, I was Secretary of State for 8 years. We modernized the election. We led the country in many of the election advancements. We were actually the third state in the country to pass automatic voter registration, and we did it in a bipartisan manner. Now, it hasn't been correctly or fully implemented yet, even 5 years later. And so, perfect for me to run for re-election in 2016, but I got trumped. We know that 2016 was a rough year, and the red wave was continuing even after the 2014 election was making its way through West Virginia. In that time, I then worked at the Brennan Center for Justice, and she said, moved and helped across the country for election advancements. But then, I continued to look at 2020 and thought the environment has changed somewhat. But late in, and it was looking good for us in West Virginia in 2020, but late in the campaign, the Trump train moved through again, even through our small towns where they would have parades, and they called it the Trump train, and lost again. And now by this time, the state has fully been drowned in red. Republicans now have a super majority in our legislature, both on the House and the Senate side. And I want to share with you some of the tidbits that those Republican leaders show with their leadership. One House of Delegate member didn't even make it to his first legislative session or his first meeting because he proudly recorded himself breaking into the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th. And he resigned a couple of days later, and the federal courts and the feds are still looking at all that he has done. So we don't know what his full indictment is. I don't believe he's been indicted yet. Our current Secretary of State certified the elections for West Virginia on a December day in 2020. And then just 4 hours later, proudly participated in a Stop the Steal rally on the state capitol grounds, saying that the presidential election was stolen. And he supported West Virginia's involvement in the lawsuit challenging the election that our Attorney General got us involved in. So that's the lay of the land a little bit in West Virginia, and that is what we face. But we do have Joe Manchin, and that is why we are always encouraging him, at the same time imploring him to support the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And I'll tell you how we are doing this. We are working in a coalition. As I said in the beginning, the whole country, the whole world is looking at us, and you get phone calls, you get emails and texts. What can we do? What can we do to change Joe Manchin? So we are part of the Declaration for American Democracy. We all call it DFAD, and you all may even be a part of it, or some of your members having been listening in on and being part of the briefings and the information and the talking points. So we're all, as a whole, advocates kind of on the same page. So we have a West Virginia DFAD coalition too, with a lot of national support from many, many organizations like Public Citizens, Represent Us, Common Cause, and Citizens United, which is also with Let America Vote. And then our local folks too, with Future for West Virginia, Citizens Action Group in West Virginia. So we're working on this very good collaboration. And we have had event after event in West Virginia. And we've had our ups and downs at the same time. Maybe all of you remember, I'm a person with dates, so June 6th was not a happy day for me. Yes, it was Sunday, June 6th, when, one of the Google alerts and one of the headlines in our statewide newspaper, the West Virginia Gazette, is an op-ed from Joe Manchin that said, "Why I'm not voting for the People Act." That was a gut punch. And we were downhearted for a couple of days. But what that did, we did not give up. And as a matter of fact, after we got over the shock and being ticked off and just being angry too, we were emboldened by it in a sense. And we think, and there's even some folks who have said, Senator Manchin was surprised by the response. He thought this would maybe hush it up and nobody would talk about it anymore. But there were positive responses to it too. We didn't attack him, and that's kind of been the mode too. That we're not attacking him. That we need him to make this work. And so advocates went to work and continued with event after event. Maybe you all saw it a week later on June 14th. Reverend William Barber and the Poor People's Campaign came to Charleston, and 300 people marched to Manchin's office. And when you get TV coverage like that with a long line of people, that's pretty powerful. It's pretty impactful. Then June 22nd came along, when there was the vote to debate the For the People Act. Manchin saw it ours way. And I guess in between the June 6th and the June 22nd, you all know that Manchin offered some of his ideas for the bill. And that was a positive thing. So after the op-ed where we were down in the dumps, then he comes back and he sees, people are not stopping with this. He offers his idea, which is a good glimmer of hope, which then shows that he voted for the ability to debate the bill, which then died. Well, that didn't deter folks either, because the way we looked at it was, this is not the end. This is only the beginning. We knew we had a long, hot summer of work to do. And what was really good, thankfully, the timing worked out. There had been in the plans a freedom bus, the freedom bus that was coming through the southern states and going to DC. It stopped in West Virginia 2 days later. So again, great coverage, great showing that we are not stopping with this. And then about 2 weeks during the July 4th recess, there was several different events around the state called the Summer Jam Tour that focused on the voting rights, healthcare, and jobs, the PRO Act. Put on and really pushed through by SEIU, the union there, Working Families Party, and a lot of other local organizations. And so this is what is continuing now. And I'm finding out, I've had the opportunity to speak to some of Senator Manchin's staff, and it is working. The phone calls, the hundreds, the thousands of phone calls that have been made to his office made to Senator Capito. I don't want to say she's a lost cause, because you can't stop calling Manchin, you can't stop calling Capito, because Manchin likes for her to be targeted the same way that he's targeted too. And so I've found that it's making a difference. that they are listening, that there is press coverage on these events. And so this is what we're doing in West Virginia. And I wanted to see if there's any questions here, but then also put a link in, because this is where Democrats abroad can be helpful. The phone calls we know are working. There is kind of like an organized group. If you guys wanted to do it yourself, and say that, but you're all in different time zones, so I'm not sure that you would be able to do it like that, but I can send you a link to some of the events that are taking place. And I think I don't know if it's the correct link that has people sign up to make, to do phone banking, to then just call West Virginians or call Senator Manchin. If you want to just take a couple minutes, call Senator Manchin at his Charleston office, at his Martinsburg office, Fairmont office, and of course his Washington, D.C. office, and call Senator Capito too, because they do count the numbers. Remember, they're politicians, and I was a politician too. And I liked what Senator Jones said, is that you lose an election, but you don't give up, and you have to keep pushing forward. And I think the guy coming up next is the same way. I'm proud to be on this panel with Adrian, and we can talk about that. So I'll put that in the link, and I'm available for questions. If that's okay. Thank you again.
Thank you, Secretary Tennant. Really appreciate your words, and a few things I think that we can certainly take away from that. From your experience as Secretary of State, the state and local elections matter. We see what a difference that makes. So important overseas voters that we are voting up and down the ballot, and keeping our eye on what's going on in the state legislatures. We're also staying active. So I appreciate you popping that link in the chat about how we can really make a difference from all around the world. Appreciate you joining us, and we'll come back to questions in just a moment. But I wanted to jump to another state that everyone has their eyes on at the moment, and that is Arizona. Our next speaker is Adrian Fontes. He's the immediate past Maricopa County recorder in Arizona. We all, I know, heard that the whole week back in November. Maricopa County is home to 2/3 of Arizona's population, and he has recently announced that he is going to be running for Arizona Secretary of State in 2022. So a few short words about him before we dive in. Adrian Fontes has spent his adult life fighting for justice and democracy as a United States Marine, as an attorney, and elections administrator for the second largest voting jurisdiction in the US, and as a father to 3 strong independent daughters. He grew up in the border city of Nogales, Arizona. His family has been in the United States and Mexico border region for over 300 years. His grandfather actually became a US citizen after serving in World War II and was elected mayor of Nogales at Adrian's 9th birthday. Adrian received his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and his law degree from the University of Denver, serving as a prosecutor with the Denver District Attorney, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and the Arizona Attorney General. In 2016, Adrian Fontes was inspired to run for Maricopa County Recorder after witnessing the shameful voter suppression efforts that created 6-hour voting lines and disproportionately impacted those living in Arizona's most vulnerable and underserved communities. He won that election, becoming the first Democrat to hold the recorder's office in 50 years, as well as the first ever Latino to hold a county-wide office in Maricopa County. As recorder, Adrian Fontes revolutionized a broken, outdated, and unjust voting system by making elections more accessible and more secure than ever before. Even in the midst of the corona pandemic and the violent insurrections at the Maricopa Recorder's Office, Adrian Fontes' administration set systems in place that led to record voter turnout in 2020. Most importantly, he worked with political and community organizers across the spectrum to increase the number of registered voters by 500,000 people, making Maricopa County the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States. We're so excited to have you with us today, Adrian. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And hello, Natalie. She and I have worked together on a couple of things with Brennan, and I've worked a little bit with Democrats abroad here and there as a member of the DNC. I get to run into some of your folks at various meetings and conferences here and there around the country here, and thank you. I know you're all over the world right now, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to be in London in August. So maybe if any of you are out there in that part of the world, we might be able to get together for a drink or a coffee. Arizona right now is going through something that is absolutely unprecedented, and it is a significant. Well, look, I'm not going to be hyperbolic. I'm going to be real. This is a clear and present danger to our democracy, period. That's it. The Senate majority, through the Senate President, Karen Fann here in Arizona, has taken they took all of the equipment and all of the ballots out of Maricopa County's possession, took them over to Veterans Memorial Coliseum, handed them over to a group called the Cyber Ninjas, who've never had any experience whatsoever with any election activity. And they've been going through it. Now it appears to be a month and a half, 2 month long analysis of these ballots. It is a dangerous process that they're going through. It's not an audit like they're calling it. And basically what they're doing is continuing the big lie because of one sore loser and pushing this idea that somehow the election was stolen. It's difficult sometimes for me to talk about it because I'm the guy who re-engineered the fundamental architecture of the election system in Maricopa County, and as indicated, we're the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States of America, with 2.6 million voters in this county alone. And we made access so available, even during the pandemic, that between 2016 and 2020, we saw an increase of 600,000 more ballots cast in just this one county. I'm incredibly proud of my team and the work that we did. And that's why I'm running for Secretary of State, but that's why what's happening in Arizona has to stop in Arizona. These kinds of post-election, post-certification, sort of post-everything's done audits need to stop. And how do we do that? Just like what Natalie said at the end of what she was saying, we need to pay attention across the country and for you all across the world. Who is your local election administrator? Many people had never heard of the Maricopa County Recorder, but there are clerks and recorders. There are assessors who do voter registration. There are probate judges who do the same in different states around, who bear these duties on their shoulders. They never get any recognition. They never get any support. And in 2020, they started getting death threats. I had members of my staff who had to move out of their houses. I even had to move my ex-wife and my kids out of the family house which was my address of record during the fall. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced something like that, but it ain't nice. And so what I want to do is make sure to emphasize to everybody out there that what's happening in Arizona isn't just kind of, oh, well, it's not going to have an impact. It's not really going to be that big of a deal. It is critically important that we support those sorts of those administrators, bureaucrats, technocrats in government locally who actually run elections. Now, I'm running for Arizona Secretary of State, but that office is a regulator. It is not an administrator. Elections in Arizona are administered at the county level, like they are in most states across the United States of America. So, we got to be smart about who is actually running our elections. We've got to support those boards of supervisors, local election boards, and things of this nature, so that we don't end up with the kinds of things that we've got right now, which is just patent nonsense happening at the expense of our democracy, right? It isn't even that bad that these folks are going out there and getting private funding to do this. I don't really think it's that bad because people give their money away for nonsense all the time anyway. But this particular activity is eroding our democracy and the confidence that we have in our democracy, and that's got to end. I just got another minute here, and I'm going to take this point of personal indulgence just to let you all know this. The Office of Secretary of State is critically important, and I want to make sure that Arizona is the last place that we have this kind of quote-unquote audit. Now, our current Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, who's a Democrat, you probably have heard of her because she's made the news recently. She's running for governor, and that's why I'm trying to follow her footsteps into the Secretary of State's office. And like any campaign will tell you, we need help. Like any politician will tell you, we need help. I'm going to throw the link to my website in the chat. I'm going to ask for your support. I'm going to be a little shameless about it here because we really need to win this thing. Because one of the guys who marched on January 6th against our constitutional as a traitor and an insurrectionist, guess what office he's running for too? Secretary of State. And this old Marine needs some backup. So if you guys will help me out, it's electfontes.com. I'll put it in the chat. And I honestly don't know if I'm going to be able to stick around for questions, but I'd love to see some of you in August in London. I think we're going to try to make arrangements through Democrats Abroad. My girlfriend that I'm going with she's indulged. She said we could do a happy hour or something. So hopefully I'll see some of you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and really grateful for all your work on the ground, and happy to support you and all of our local election officials from afar. So really hats off to everything that you did this past election cycle and to everything that you're trying to do now. Just to ask about your time, I think we might move to a few questions, and it looks like Natalie is still on the call. If you have 4 to 5 minutes to stick around. Great.
Absolutely.
All right. If you have any questions for Natalie or Adrian, please feel free to type those in the chat box now, and we will take those. I see one immediately here, which is, thank you, Adrian. Let us know how we can help.
Well, guess what? electfontes.com has a donate button. So your fortune and your time, that's what we need. We're going to need folks to do some phone banking and calling. I would like to be called Mr. Secretary, just like Natalie gets the title Madam Secretary. Mr. Recorder's not bad, but let's take it to the next level, folks. It's really important. So also, if you've got networks of your own around the world, or around the United States of America, spreading the word about local candidates like this or statewide, like the Secretary, is always very important, very helpful. We're trying to build a grassroots campaign. I was on the phone with folks in New York and California and other states very recently. So any help you guys can give is very welcome and much appreciated. Thank you, Danielle, for putting that link up.
Great, thank you. Natalie, any words? I know you've already given us a list of things we can do, but any further thoughts really on just how we can be engaged in this process and be fighting for our democracy?
Yes, just keep pushing it. You know, we don't know what will happen over the next couple of weeks. There's been word that Senator Schumer may extend and push the recess back a little bit. That may be helpful. Those phone calls, even I don't know what time it is where people are, but you know, maybe a Monday morning phone call, set your phone and call Senator Manchin and call Senator Manchin or Senator Capito and Senator Manchin, and become part of the link that I put in. Doesn't have everything that I necessarily like and use on some of our DFAD calls, but you can find out what is taking place with the different door knocks and the different phone bankings that are taking place. I mean, and the same may go, we're always asking for money. And the irony is that, we want to end Citizens United, but for us to be able to do that, there's many of these organizations that still need support to be able to do funding, to get people to go canvassing door to door. So that's the irony. And that's the tough part of it, is that you still need funds and resources to be able to do that. Citizens Action Group in West Virginia does a great job. Even the Working Families Party is doing a great job in West Virginia. Maya said, what do you suggest if you're not one of Manchin constituents? Well, the thing is, the way I look at it, this is why you're a U.S. Senator. You're not United States Senator, and you are one of his constituents. What he does or doesn't do has an impact on all of us. So throw that aside and just say, we're calling and asking. And I'm not sure how, I try to talk to him in person or talk to some of his staffers. So I haven't made that phone call to his office. So I'm not sure what, and I probably should, just to hear what they're saying and what the way they're responding to callers who call in, but just say, this is important for all of us. And this is Senator Manchin's legacy. Remember, he was Secretary of State in 2002 when the Help America Vote Act was passed. And he knows that it was not a federal takeover. Neither of these bills that we're talking about, For the People or the John Lewis bill, are federal takeovers. They actually can help to empower. And that's what you can implore on Senator Manchin, is this is about your legacy. This is about voting rights. He's 70 some years old. He's not 50 some years old or 40 some years old like Byrd was was when Byrd filibustered the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and he had 50 years to, repair his reputation. This is important, and Manchin recognizes that too. He really does, and I believe he wants to do the right thing, and we all have to help him. I hate the word, but this phrase, but I use it all the time. Help him save face. And that's what we're trying to do. We're going to name the bill after him. The compromise.
Were there a couple of technical questions in the chat that I saw some of them pop up on the bottom, but I couldn't read them quick enough?
There were a few questions, but I see that we have our next speaker on already, so I'm afraid we're going to have to close the question section for the time being. But thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you, Natalie, for joining us today. Really appreciate, again, all the work that you're doing on the ground to keep democracy alive. And thank you for joining us today to talk about.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing you, Natalie. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stay on a little bit and find the phone numbers for you guys.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we'll shift gears again. So many battleground states, so many important things happening. And we're going to jump to Georgia now and hear from Hillary Hawley, who is Director of Operations at Fair Fight Action. A little bit about Hillary. She was born in Augusta, Georgia, and raised in Lawrenceville. Moved to Atlanta then to attend Georgia State University, where she became active in local criminal justice reform movements. Hillary taught middle school writing, where she incorporated current social justice issues. She left teaching then in 2018 to work for the Abrams for Governor campaign to ensure that Georgia's activists and movement family was represented and involved in Abrams' historic campaign. After the campaign ended, Hillary kept working for Stacey Abrams and her new voting rights organization, Fair Fight Action, and where she is currently the director of organizing for Fair Fight. She manages all grassroots volunteers, partnerships with allied organizations, and is working every day to build a grassroots and grass tops network that is fighting for voting rights and government accountability. Hillary, we're so glad you can join us today. Would love to hear a little bit about what's going on in Georgia and your work at Fair Fight. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate being here with you all this afternoon, this evening. Here it's the morning, but I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and there is a lot going on with voting rights, as always. So there's three different, I would say, issues that we are currently fighting all at the same time. So the first one, of course, is what Natalie was saying before me, is the fight to pass the For the People Act, and make sure that we're also passing the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which, it was one of John Lewis's legacy, and a year ago today is actually the day of his passing. So the reason why we are very, very into the fight to pass the For the People Act is because, as you all know, here in Georgia and numerous states across the country, we have seen the right to vote under attack, not just in Georgia's legislature, but also on a county level, where they are removing Black elder Board of Election members who were fierce advocates in their county election boards to protect the right to vote and make sure that voting rights were accessible. So, for example, I want to say in February or March, we saw Governor Kemp sign SB 202, which was a 96-page voter suppression bill that basically went after Georgia's entire election system. And then at the same time, they passed local legislation to remove the Board of Election members that I just mentioned as well, because voter suppression can happen is sometimes most impactful on the county level. And so with all that being said, we didn't just see some provisions like that in bills passed in Georgia. We've seen bills passed like this in Arizona. They're trying to do that in Texas, but we've also seen similar bills like this in New Hampshire. We've seen other bills passing, anti-voting bills. They're attempting to do this in Michigan and Pennsylvania. And these are very, very critical battleground states, right? And as we know, they're trying to do this in Texas. And so what Georgia and Fair Fight is actually doing is we're working in solidarity with all the states across the country where voting rights have been under attack both on the county level and the state level, to help further the argument as to why we need Congress to act. And so S1, sorry, my cat really likes to be on my lap during Zoom calls, but S1 is written in a way that could really help mitigate some of the harms that we are seeing the Republicans trying to take in these states, right? And so we need that to help mitigate the harm, but also S1 also ensures that we can have an independent redistricting process, right? So people keep asking us, what's the sense of urgency? And the main sense of urgency, other than the attack on the right to vote, is the states are about to move into the redistricting process as early as August 15th. And without any protections on a federal level, when it comes to try to stop gerrymandering, we need those protections while we move into these state fights. So we do not have until September. We do not have until December to pass these bills. We have to have it right now. Republicans in Georgia, they're already holding so-called hearings on redistricting. Behind the scenes, I am sure that they are already drawing the maps. So redistricting is happening right now. And so we have seen what the Republicans did earlier in this year on the state level for voter suppression. We are about to see what they're going to do on a state level for redistricting, and S1 encompasses all of that. And so our deadline is the end of August, because if we don't have these bills at the end of August, we are in serious in danger, not just going into 2020, but for the next 10 years. Remember that, because redistricting happens after the census. And so the time is now. And that is another reason why Georgians and Georgia voters came out in historical numbers, is because we knew that if we were to help deliver a trifecta in DC, we can really make sure that the next 10 years, we have a fighting chance. So that's what we're doing here on the federal level, advocating for the right to vote by working with all the states across the country who are dealing with similar attacks as Georgia. The second thing that we're dealing with in Georgia on a state level is the Secretary of State and his team are continuing to go after counties and trying to take them over, in counties that are very, very critical to winning in Georgia. So for example, earlier this week, the Secretary of State's office is bowed down once again to dangerous conspiracy theories. There is a lie circulating that ballots in Fulton County, which is the county where the city of Atlanta is held, there are lies and conspiracies that people were double voting in Fulton County. This was so-called reported, but only picked up in far-right news channels. And the Secretary of State is listening to them. And so he is now calling on the resignation for the Fulton County election supervisor and another staffer. And what is very concerning about this is the language that he is using is very similar to the language that former President Trump is currently using, the conspiracy theorists are using. And so for a minute during, if you all recall, last November during the elections, the press was all glorifying Brad Raffensperger for standing up to Trump. And we were very, very responsive, saying, do not glorify this man, because they are all built from the same ilk. And we are seeing that in real time right now. So our Secretary of State is working hand in hand with these conspiracy theorists, trying to dismantle the Fulton County Election Board, then because of SB 202, the bill I mentioned earlier, that bill then allows the state to appoint anyone in the state to then take over the Fulton County Election Board. And they don't even have to live in Fulton County. So what this means is that if they were to invoke SB 202 right now, they could then actually appoint a Republican who is not pro-democracy, take over our elections which has some of the, which, you know, is Fulton County is a city of Atlanta. It is the bedrock. It's John Lewis's former district that has majority Black voters in it. And as I said earlier, so that is a big threat with what's currently happening in Fulton County, but they are also doing this in rural counties as well that has high percentages of Black voters. So for example, we've seen the Secretary of State's office, or not the Secretary of State's office, the Georgia Republican-held legislature remove and fire election board members from these 3 counties. So Morgan County, Spalding County, and Troup County, all of which are very, like they have a very high amount of Black voters. And so we are also preparing for this to happen in several additional counties here in Georgia. And let me tell you why they are doing this right now. So, but I'm going to take it back a little bit. So after 2018, when Stacey was very close to becoming governor, following in 2019, we saw them really starting to chip away at democracy in Georgia because they were preparing for 2020. So everything that we saw last year, they had actually started doing that in 2019. So that is exactly what is happening right now, okay? So 2021 is when they go to do all their plotting. This is when they're gonna start shutting down polling locations, taking over Board of Election boards, trying to limit the amount of time that you can request an absentee ballot, defunding Board of Election offices, or not funding them properly. And so we are watching very closely about everything that's happening and fighting and responding to every single issue we're seeing in every county, because like I said, what they're doing right now is preparing for next year. Because remember, Senator Warnock is up for re-election next year. Last election was a special election. So he is basically the campaign started now. And so Georgia has another US Senate race next year, a gubernatorial race, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the entire legislature. So 2022 is very critical for Georgia, but it's also critical for Democrats to continue holding the trifecta in Congress, right? Because if we were to lose Warnock's seat, that could then jeopardize Leader Schumer's majority. And if they redraw the maps, because we do not have federal protection, they could then redraw Congresswoman Lucy McBath's district and Congresswoman Carolyn Bordeaux's district. And then Speaker Pelosi could also help lose her majority lead because Georgia. So, but with all that being said, I know that's like doom and gloom, but we have a plan, okay? Stacey Abrams always has a plan and we are always working. So there's 2 things I need you all to do. And this is one thing that Natalie was hinting on. No matter what state you are registered to vote in, okay? It could be Idaho, Georgia, West Virginia, Arizona, Maine, Alaska. We need you all calling your US senators every single day. Every single day. Because as we know, Joe Manchin and Sinema, they are not the only Democrats who are not completely sold on the For the People Act, okay? They're just the ones who are most public about it. So we really need to make sure, but I see you all dropping this. What we've done with our partners is we've created a patch through number. So you can call this office, this number, 888, whoops, sorry, I sent a private message on accident. So the number is 888-453-3211. And what this is able to do, all the organizations are using this number because we can then track how many calls are going into the offices, right? So let's say if Senator Collins starts to say something wild, we can then all pivot and be like, oh no, we only have 200 calls going into our office a day. Now let's target Maine even harder. So using this number helps us become smarter when it comes to targeting. So please call your senators every single day. And another reason why we need you to call, even if they're Republican, the Republicans on the state level, they are so egregious in their voter suppression that the voter suppression is also harming their voters. Okay, so for example, in the recent SCOTUS decision that was devastating to Section 2, the highest impact, negative impact of that decision is actually on Native and Indigenous voters. For example, Senator Murkowski, a Republican in Alaska, 30% of her voters are Native voters. So SCOTUS decision had a negative impact on her voters, okay? And the Republicans are starting to see, like, oh my gosh, we're actually being so egregious in our actions that we are suppressing our voters, okay? And remember, Murkowski, Romney, Collins, while they are issues, at one point in time, they did the right thing and they voted to impeach Trump, right? They wanted to hold him accountable after the Stop the Steal insurrection. So call everybody, no matter where you are. And another reason why is because the right wing is extremely organized, very, very organized. And so sometimes in Democratic states, the only people that they are hearing from are right-wing people. And so even the Democrats need to hear you call and say, we got your back. We know that the Republicans in our state are calling you every day, but I want to thank you. Okay, so for example, while I know Warnock and Ossoff are strong in the For the People Act and they're going to fight, I'm still asking Georgians to call them every day just to say thank you, because it really makes a difference. And I know it makes a difference because congressional staff will literally call us and be like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting people know, or having people tell us we have our back, okay? The second thing that we need you all to do, and I'll drop the link in here shortly, is we are about to start texting voters in several states across the country to ask them to call their senator. So we need help with texting. Right now, we are aiming to text 4 million people in the next week. So if you have extra time, please text. And I will be, like I said, I'll drop the link in the chat. I promise. I just need to find it really quickly. But we need your help texting. And then also, the last thing is, if you want to hear more about why we need S1, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is chairwoman of the Senate Rules Committee, and this is a very important committee in Congress, because this is where the For the People Act is stalled, okay? So the bill's not dead, it's just stuck there. And so what she is doing is holding a field hearing in Georgia, both tomorrow and on Monday. So here is the Mobilize link where you can watch this field hearing on Monday, so you can hear from Georgia voters and watch the Senate Rules Committee. So call your senator every day, join our text bank, and if you want to watch the Senate Rules Committee hearing, please find that link, and it's at 10 a.m. on Monday. And so I just want to thank you all so much for having me on this morning, this afternoon, this evening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Hillary. Really hats off to you and to the whole Fair Fight team for doing all the important work in Georgia. As you mentioned, so much is on the line next year with all these races, both at the state and federal level and the local level. So thank you for your engagement in the links there so that we can join as well. I know a few links have been posted. We will compile those and make sure that they're accessible to the participants after the call. So I'm afraid we don't have time for questions, but really thank you so much for your inspiring words and for all the work you're doing. And please extend that to your entire team as well. I'm going to toss this back over to Angela Fobbs now, who will continue with the next section of our event.
Okay. All right. We've learned a lot of things, and we're going to learn a little bit more. We're going to show a short documentary film about suppression, all the suppression that's gone on around the United States in 2021. Just one second, and I will share my screen.
Record levels.
Record registrations.
Historic voter turnout.
The 2020 election was the most secure in U.S. history.
Fair, transparent, accurate.
The most secure in history.
After losing the presidential election, the lesson they have learned is that if lots of people vote and they choose your opponent, you should just figure out how to stop people from voting.
Republicans are currently pushing 253 voter suppression bills, all aimed at shutting down access to the ballot.
Everybody should be horrified by this attempt to build walls around the ballot box.
In the battleground state of Pennsylvania, where Biden sealed his victory, Republicans have proposed 15 new voter suppression bills. Among these are a slew of new photo ID laws. Pennsylvania lawmakers are also looking to expand arbitrary voter roll purges. The only way to fight hundreds of voter suppression laws is through sweeping national legislation.
The best solution is that we have action by Congress, that H.R. 1, the For the People Act, passed for the protection of democracy.
In Georgia, where Biden narrowly flipped the state by nearly 12,000 votes, Republican legislators have proposed 22 voter suppression bills.
There are those who are trying to compromise the voices of the electorate so that politicians can pick their voters rather than have voters pick those who would represent them.
One of these bills in Georgia would end automatic voter registration. An even more blatant attack on African American voters in Georgia is the proposal to eliminate early voting on Sundays. It is a way to go after souls to the polls.
Souls to the polls and vote.
Where Black churches on Sunday have their congregation get on buses and go to the polls to vote.
Black voters in Georgia are 30% of the electorate, but made up 37% of Sunday voters.
After Biden's close win in Arizona, Republicans there have proposed 22 of their own voter suppression bills. One of Arizona Republicans' most flagrant bills requires absentee ballots to be notarized. We're asking them to go out and go find a notary, an additional hurdle in order to exercise their right to vote. Nearly half of all Americans who voted by mail in the 2020 election. One of the most egregious proposals from Arizona state legislature would give them the power to assign the state's electoral college votes to whomever the state legislature wanted, not whomever the people in the majority voted for.
Judges in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia have all thrown out lawsuits from Trump administration.
Another Trump lawsuit now dismissed.
No evidence.
No evidence. Cases thrown out.
The Justice Department has found no evidence of voting fraud.
Tossing out his election challenge.
Trump has lost 59 lawsuits.
The U.S. Supreme Court rejecting that lawsuit.
It is more likely that Americans will be struck by lightning than commit voter fraud. More Americans will give birth to triplets than commit voter fraud. You are more likely to be injured by a toilet than commit voter fraud.
Voter fraud is a myth. It does not exist, but voter suppression is real.
This is clearly about race.
This is really a new form of Jim Crow. They are targeting the voting methods that were used the most by Black voters, and those very voting methods that led to higher turnout, those are the things that are on the chopping block right now.
I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down.
They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again.
We We just had record turnout, and it was the most secure election in American history. Republicans are working overtime to stop you from voting. We can defeat these Jim Crow-like voter suppression efforts by supporting the For the People Act, a nationwide bill that would protect your right to vote.
I urge each and every one of our colleagues to support this bill. Today, we are able to do our part in this long fight for the very soul of our nation.
Now it's up to all of us to get the For the People Act passed.
All right. So we know they're working around the clock to stop us from voting. Daniela, are you there? I'd like for us to share some information about how you can write your senators and your congressmen to affect change. Are you there, Daniela?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Hi.
All right. Awesome. If you want to give us a little demonstration of the guide that we set up, or how to contact and what to do to contact your senators, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Like Hillary, my cat likes to be on Zooms. Okay, so we're all thinking, what do we do? And hopefully we have a guide that we've put together to help you reach out to your representatives. And I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat here. And then I'm gonna drop 2 links. So that's a link to a guide to writing and calling your senators. Oh, sorry, that went private. 1 second. So there's a link for you. The first thing that I think we need to do as we're reaching out is to find out where your senator stands. So we've actually got a link here that you can use to look and see what is the latest thing that your representative has said about the For the People Act and reforming the filibuster, or getting rid of the filibuster so that we can pass this very important legislation. And if you scroll down on that page, you'll see that there's a chart that tells you the last thing that your senator has said publicly on the subject. So the heading that you're looking for there is where we stand. And I'm just trying to pull this up so that maybe I could show it to you.
Yeah, maybe you could share your screen.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Okay. So can you see this? Yep. Okay. So if you scroll down, you see this heading. It says where we stand. And this is specifically with respect to the filibuster, because as we've heard today, as long as we have the filibuster as in its current form, we are not going to be able to pass this legislation because it requires 60 votes in order to bring a bill to the floor. And we don't have 60 votes, we have 50. So you can look down here and you can see, it goes state by state in order, what the last thing that your senator has publicly said is on the subject. So we all know Kristen Sinema is not on board. And if you are an Arizona voter, you could click this helpful link and it would take you to a script and a tool that would help you call her to help change her mind. And you can do that for any of these senators. So I think it's really important. We heard earlier today that actually a lot of people just aren't saying anything. And you may assume that because you are in a Democratic state, you have a Democratic senator, that your senator is on board. Dianne Feinstein, like, she hasn't publicly committed to doing this. So you should be calling her. Same here. Look at Colorado, Michael Bennet, John Hickenlooper. Like, look and see exactly what has been said by your senator. And if it's not a full-on commitment to doing this and getting it done, then call them and say, you know, where are you on this? Are you committed to passing the For the People Act? And how are you going to do that as long as we have this procedural hurdle that we cannot overcome? So I find this a really helpful resource because it does show you where people are based on what they've said publicly. And it does provide this really helpful link that you can use in order to call them. The other tool that we have available, as I mentioned previously, is, I don't know if you can see all my windows or can you only see that window? Okay. So we also have this link, which I dropped into the chat, to contact your senator. And you can see here we have sample scripts. And we heard from Hillary that it's important not only to urge those who are not committed to take a position and to take the one that's going to allow us to implement the reforms that are so crucial, but it's also really important for you to thank them. So if you find out that they are supporting it, then you can say, as you can see here in this script, that's great. Please let them know I'm glad they're supporting HR 1 and eliminating or reforming the filibuster, and I hope they can encourage their colleagues to do the same. So it is really important to call those who are committed and to tell them you appreciate it, that it's important to you. And it's also important for those who haven't to reach out to them as well. So the other thing that we have here is we have a writing script that you can use to send an email to your senators or a letter. And we have also provided a really helpful tool, which is ResistBot. So I do urge you to take the time to look at this, but the ResistBot is pretty cool. And I used it myself this morning, actually, and it's so easy. So you can use it from the website, or you can use it on your phone. So for example, I clicked the link on my phone, I texted 5049, and I got a response just like this you're seeing on the screen. Hi, I'm ResistBot. What would you like to write to Congress? And so, you give your information and you type the note that you want. Like, for example, Congress needs to pass HR 1 now. Well, isn't that convenient? Because that's exactly what we're trying to tell people. And it knows, based on your address information, who your representatives are, and you can choose who to send it to, and it will send them just like that through your phone. You don't even have to get out a pen and paper. You don't have to get a stamp. You don't have to even open your email. So it's a really great tool. And I really suggest that that you try it out and do it today. Like, it's easy. Do it right after this. Do it now, or do it right after we're done right here. It really takes less than 5 minutes and it's seamless. And we could do it every day, just like Hillary said. Like, this is too important. And, I think we've all probably seen the news about the Texas delegation and going to basically plead their case. We've seen the news about, congresswomen being arrested because they're advocating for voting rights this week. We can't be there in person, but this is what we can do. So I really urge everybody to take these actions.
Thank you, Daniela. There was a question in the chat, is it better to call or write? And it's probably better to call, but if for some reason you can't call, you don't have time, or your time zone is wrong or something of this nature, then please just send a message. Don't try to find a time that's right for you if it never comes. Like, they need to hear from you now. Our next speaker is Barbara Simmons, and she's going to talk to us about internet voting. Barbara, are you there?
Yes, I am. Let me try to share my screen. Wait a second. Okay, let me. Sorry. All right, you can't see what you're seeing. Are you seeing the full screen, or are you seeing the
Yes,
next?
we see your slide about internet voting.
Just one slide, okay. We've been talking a lot during this Zoom call about voter suppression, which is a critical issue, and these laws that have been discussed are really terrible. But there's another elephant in the room that's been ignored, and that is, even if voters get past all of the suppression laws and all of the restrictions that are being put in place, if their votes are not properly counted, then that's yet another form of suppression. And that's what I'm going to address in this call. We've been fortunate that there's been no We don't know of any successful attacks for rigging in 2020, but we still must not let our guard down. I'm going to just speak about one piece of making elections secure. There are many aspects to it, but given the short amount of time, I'm going to focus on internet voting. That's defined as returning a voted ballot over the internet via a web or email attachment. Email, if anything, is perhaps even more dangerous than a web attachment because email ballots can be modified en route. These are PDF files. They can be modified en route. They can be lost. There's a risk of no secret ballot. And they can be counterfeited and ballot boxes can be stuffed. And internet voting is anything that's done using a personal computer, a smartphone, a smart tablet, and so forth. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. And this is a question I'd like everybody to ponder. What if 6 months after an election that involves internet voting, it is discovered or even claimed that the election was hacked? What would happen then? Election officials, so-called elected people who won the elections would have been installed in place. And we then would have to convince that they're now losers, that they've actually lost. And if you think 2020 with steal the election was bad, you can just imagine what this would be like. And if you think that elections can't be hacked or there couldn't be problems, I just present to you this slide. I apologize for the small font. This is only a partial list. I keep on adding to it. At the top, I've got a couple of elections, the internet elections that were rigged. They're minor elections, and that's why we know about them, because they were able to go back and check. The New Zealand Bird of the Year election I find rather amusing. Colonial Pipeline, they had ransom. They were successfully attacked. The acting Department of Health, the Department of Health, the DHS secretary's emails were hacked. Capital One, Marriott, Office of Personnel Management, Pentagon emails, and so on and so forth. And to state the obvious, how can underfunded, understaffed, under-resourced local election officials with little to no computing proficiency or computer security expertise protect their servers in an internet-based election against well-financed adversaries such as foreign countries, political operatives, and rogue hackers? And we know that Russia was involved with our elections in 2016 and almost certainly in 2020 as well. So, excuse me. There are multiple vulnerabilities with elections, starting with authentication, with internet elections, starting with authentication. How do you know that the person at the other end is the person he or she claims to be? There can be malware on voters' devices. I don't know how many of you have had malware on your machines, but this happens frequently, and it can happen without your knowing. An example of it happening to somebody who has a lot of resources available is when Jeff Bezos's iPhone was hacked. What you see on the screen may not be what's sent out over the internet. There can be a denial of service attack that can prevent real ballots from reaching election officials. An example of this is what happened with Hurricane Sandy in 2012. I was in New York at the time. It was not an attack, but it was a denial of service because after Hurricane Sandy, I attempted to reach United Airlines. It took me 2 days to even get through. And that's because everybody was attempting to reach United Airlines. And that was a denial of service. The same thing can happen with internet voting, where everybody knows who the election officials are, what their email addresses are, and they can send tons of emails to them and make it impossible for legitimate voters to get their votes received. There can be penetration attacks on the vote servers, which can change votes once they've been received by election officials. Internet elections cannot be audited or recounted because we can't be certain that the elections were accurately, that the ballots were accurately recorded. There are no regulations for internet voting. There are no independent standards. There's no independent testing. There's no government oversight. There's no legal accountability or ability to recount. The National Institute of Standards and Technology was asked to develop standards for internet voting. They produced reports, but no standards saying that technology that is widely deployed today is not available to mitigate many of the threats to casting ballots via the web. and malware on voters' personal computers posed a serious threat that could compromise the secrecy or integrity of voters' ballots. And this is the government saying this. And then we've seen ransomware attacks recently. In September 2020, Universal Health Services, which was one of the largest healthcare providers in the United States, was successfully hacked, and they suffered almost $67 million in pre-tax losses. In 2021, Colonial Pipeline was hacked. They paid over $4 million in ransom, some of which was subsequently retrieved, that caused major East Coast fuel shortages that in fact, that resulted in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration declaring a regional emergency. And these are major companies, major players that have so much more in the way of resources than election officials. Internet voting is used in the United States in about 30 states. And the MOVE Act was passed in 2009. And I think a lot of overseas voters aren't aware of it. At least I hope you are, but I don't know. The MOVE Act requires states to provide online blank ballots for all overseas voters at least 45 days in advance of an election. And military voters also get expedited postal mail return of voted ballots. So in almost all cases, it should be possible for citizens overseas to return their voted ballots in time to be counted. And also internet voting doesn't really help increase voter participation. There was a major British Columbia study that showed that internet voting does not increase participation in general, or even by young people, which really surprised the people who led the study. They were sure that young people would vote more over the internet. What they found was that people who were going to vote anyway voted over the internet. It didn't increase voter participation. And so there were similar results from Estonia and Switzerland. So
Barbara, thank you. If we could just do maybe 15 more seconds, and then we unfortunately have to move on.
Right. So I just want, okay, so one last slide. I just want to talk about mobile voting. So mobile voting is voting over your cell phone, over your smartphone. And it's being touted by mobile voting vendors as being secure, but it's not. It's basically internet voting. There are two major vendors, Votes and Democracy Live. Both, there have been independent studies done of both of them that show that they're fundamentally insecure. And I'd be happy to take questions if people have any questions about that. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barbara. Theresa Ritterhoff is our next speaker. Are you there, Theresa?
I am here.
Hang on one second. You are here. Let me find you and put you on the spotlight. Great. There you are, Theresa.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angela.
Did you want me to show your slides, or are you going to do them yourself?
Share my screen.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it seems to work.
Yes.
Okay. Oops, but that's not what I wanted to share. All right, hold on one second. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this event and for asking me to say a few words about a new way to take action, which has been a key word today with good reason. So a new way to take action with Democrats abroad is to join one of our new state teams. And you see the states down here that are organizing. We actually have a few more already waiting in the wings. California, North Carolina, and Vermont also started organizing. So just a really quick history, very short history, because we haven't been around too long. But Texas really took the lead early this year with my co-chair, Jennifer von Estorff, and several others organizing for that state. And they themselves were following in the footsteps or in the wake of our efforts in Georgia to get out the vote for the Senate runoff there, which, as we've heard today several times, were enormously successful. And they were also successful and important for us as an organization. Part of the idea here was to kind of harness that energy that we saw go behind the efforts in Georgia. And it's kind of a double-pronged energy, obviously coming from the voters in Georgia who vote from overseas in Georgia, but also the way that all of us got behind them and sort of gave them wind beneath their wings. And that was something we wanted to sort of harness and bring along with us as we go into the midterms, which are just a little more than a year away, as I'm sure most of you are aware. So these states are what we sort of call key states. Several of them have been mentioned today. That's not a coincidence. And so what we were really trying to do here is lean into what we all know to be true, that we've talked about several times today. All politics are local. Sounds counterintuitive maybe for overseas voters to lean into that message, but it's really not. We all know that we vote in a particular locale. And even if one of your voting state is not represented here, there's still a lot you can do to get involved. We really encourage you to adopt a state or get on a team with a state that either you have another kind of connection to. I myself voted in Illinois and am part of the Wisconsin team. Wisconsin is where I was born, it's where I went to high school, and it's also a state that I consider to be really key. So any kind of connection or just belief that this is a state that needs help is enough to be part of a team. So there are a lot of things that the various states focus on. We have three basic pillars: voter protection, voter assistance, and voter mobilization. And I'm just going to focus on the last one for today's purposes, and say a few words about voting down ballot from overseas, which is a challenge. And there are sort of inner challenges and external challenges. A lot of people sort of have a feeling that they shouldn't vote down ballot from overseas because they're not living there. I think we've heard several good reasons already today why that is not the way to think about it. There are things that are decided at the local level, state and local, that affect all of us, and not least access to and the right to vote itself. Then there's some misinformation sometimes that even in our circles about voting down ballot, some people think they can't vote down ballot. That is rarely the case. There are sometimes obstacles in your way laid by various states, but not as many as you would think. And it's really worth digging down and figuring out what exactly the procedures are in your state. And that's something that having state teams is also going to help us to do. So I hope this just very brief overview is enough to pique your curiosity. If you're not on board with us yet, you can get involved, and I'm going to put the email in the chat where you can reach out for further questions or to get hooked up with a state's team. Love to have you on board. There it is.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yes, please get involved with the state teams. They're doing some great work, and we hope that you will join if you want to join one of those teams. I'm definitely, I've joined the Florida team and pseudo joined Ohio. I'm from Ohio, but I vote in Florida. Our next speaker is Maya Buchanan. She's the head of our voter protection team. Maya, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
And Angela, are you going to share? Can you share the slide?
I can do that.
Okay.
All right. Here are your slides.
Great. Thank you very much. And hold on a second. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to this really amazing forum. So voting rights is at the front of our minds at the moment, and strong voter protection efforts will be part of the solution that we need to undertake to be proactive in the climate that we're in. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so it's critical to keep advancing in this area as we work to help pass voting rights legislation and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And we've heard of a lot of the challenges around that. So voter protection is more important than ever. There's more to be covered there's more in this slide deck that I can cover in a few minutes. So I'm going to share that in the chat box in a minute so that you can look at that at your leisure. But I can point out a few things if you, so yeah, we are slides. Here are some projects that we worked on in 2020. We worked on ballot return by email, targeted messaging to share information with voters, geo-blocking solutions, Zoom actions. We collected 2 big voter data sets through surveys, and the information that came in via intercom, which has been amazingly important for our work going forward, and we've utilized it really successfully already. Then we built a 17-member team of lawyers and advisors and intercom responders who work directly with voters to resolve issues during the general election, ballot curing process, and the Georgia Senate races. For a more detailed look at our work, there's a link at the bottom of this slide to our end of year report, which you can view at your leisure. If you can go to the next slide. You can skim through this and the next slide. This is just, I wanted to show kind of how some of the analysis looks like for voter issues. So if you click through that one and the next one. Yeah, and the next one. Thanks. So here are some actions that we took in 2021. We worked on projects at both the federal and state level on a position paper for Amy Klobuchar's team for the People Act. We had a state bill tracking project to help examine any bills introduced affecting overseas voters in key states. And I also wanted to highlight some of the work that we've done in support of the state legislative teams, following on from what Theresa was just saying. We've been able to use the data analysis that we've collected, or all the voter data that we've collected for analysis, to give personal stories and testimony. I wonder if you could, can you click just very briefly on that link at the bottom? Yeah, I think that will open up.
Can you still see my screen? Can you see the browser?
I can still see your screen.
Okay, good.
But it doesn't anyway. So it's an Excel sheet, but it shows, so that hasn't worked, but don't worry, Angela, just you can just go back to the previous thing. So it's an Excel, but it shows
there you go.
Tons of, yeah, I don't think it's still not showing. It hasn't for me anyway.
Oh, okay. Right.
Okay, don't worry about that. Anyway, it shows, and it's in the slide deck, and it shows a lot of the data analysis that we were able to supply to the Texas team, drilling down by issue and county. Really important to have that data, and we didn't have that before, so it was a huge effort. Finally, I did want to say, I know I'm running out of time, but this is just as I was reflecting on John Lewis's incredible work and the civil rights movement. I wanted to share a small story of my mom, and I wondered.
Yes, let me share the picture for you. One moment.
All right, okay. So my mom is the woman on the right here who's singing, and these stills are from the John Lewis Good Trouble film. And hang on a second. And yeah, so, you know, one of the things that I just really felt as I was exploring and thinking about this, you know, my mom died last year, so I wasn't able to ask her about all of this, but she was from Chicago, and she worked for the Chicago chapter of CORE, which is the Congress of Racial Equality, in her late teens. And then she went to Georgia, where this footage was taken, when she was 19, and then returned to Chicago to work for Dr. King on his staff for the Chicago Project, which was the Chicago Freedom Movement. And my mum was one of many, many people coming together to meet the moment of the time to build and mobilize the civil rights movement. And I really feel that that's what John Lewis did. He continually rose to meet this moment. And I'm just really inspired by all of the messages and his own words to us as Democrats Abroad members. And I like to think that we can all rise to meet this moment that we're in right now and to stand on the right side of history as we strive toward what John Lewis called the beloved community. And I just, I'm really grateful for his work and for all of the people who contributed to make that movement. So so that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maya. And if you're ever having problems getting your ballot or having trouble returning it or anything having to do with problems with your ballot, please contact our voter protection. They're there to help you. And
exactly. And I will put the link for that in the chat as well, the email.
Thank you. We are almost done. This has been a kind of an action-packed day. Is Nadine Hack still here? Are you still here, Nadine?
I'm here, Angela.
All right. Sorry, we had to move you.
No problem. I have been so utterly inspired by everybody. It's like, thank you, Global Black Caucus, Democrats Abroad, Canada Chapter, and all the others. It reminds me why I love organizers so much. This is like a booster shot of vitamins for all of us. And so I'm sitting here in front of our wall, our Sheroes wall, with posters hand signed by Cesar Chavez, Coretta Scott King, Walter and Albertina Sisulu, with my husband, Jerry Dunphy, and I, who knew John since the 1960s. Jerry working with Harry Belafonte, raising money for Dr. King, while I, a bit younger, organizing with index cards and mimeograph machines to get people to the marches. I was probably there with your mom. We're so honored to join this tribute to John. And with our background of activism as a couple and as individuals, even before we met each other, we decided that we would talk about a different aspect than everybody else, about the love of John's life, his magnificent wife, Lillian Miles Lewis. So while John was the gentle warrior, a saint to all of us and so many others, she was a true force of nature. And they were perfect complements to each other. And in their marriage, until she died in 2012, and their marriage was quite like ours. Jerry is soft-spoken, stand in the back of the room man who still galvanizes people around the globe for social justice with that quiet power John wielded. And I'm the in-your-face pushy broad from Brooklyn. And from Los Angeles, cut of the same cloth of unbeatable, indomitable boldness. When Lillian asked us or anyone for anything, no one could refuse, especially when she was raising funds. She did not take no for an answer. She was a rock of strength and unyielding determination. And yet with John, she was a tender partner. We can only picture them smiling together like high school sweethearts. And of course, John was quite strong on his own right, yet in partnership with Lillian, he and they were absolutely unstoppable. So today, we just envision them in a gorgeous embrace, surrounded by the great ancestors with whom they have each richly earned their place. And we thank you, John and Lillian, and may your memory always be a blessing to all the countless people who were inspired by you and love you deeply. And we will keep your legacy alive by fighting to expanding voter rights and ending voter suppression and following up on all the wonderful suggestions that we got from the fabulous participants you pulled together today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The fight goes on.
Wow, thank you so much, Nadine, for sharing that wonderful story with us. We all want to keep John's legacy going, for sure. All right, we're almost home. We're about to land the plane, everybody. I just want to share one last thing before we close out. One of our poet laureates has written a poem for this occasion. and it is definitely worth hearing. So this poem is from Alexandra Smith. She's a DA China member and one of our GBC Poet Laureates.
Self-evident truth. Our nation was conceived in the minds of men who felt that tyranny was the greatest threat to liberty. But the self-evident truth of equality they wrote about did not include all, and thus was born a divided and unequal nation. A nation bathed in the blood of indigenous people, built on the backs of Black posterity and sustained by women, seen only as the lesser sex. So they marched a tear-stained trail to a desolate and now seemingly forgotten refuge. They marched through showers of bullets and bombs and cannons. They marched against the wills of people who were undermining their worth. This nation owes a debt. It owes the promise of freedom for our bravery. It owes citizens the protection each amendment provides. It owes us all the opportunity to forge any path we want.
Amen.
So we vote. We vote to ensure our history is included and thus not repeated. We vote to create a system that works for us instead of against us. We vote to guarantee our voice is always there. We vote to be heard. We vote to be seen. We vote to be equal. Because this land is our land too. And we will never stop fighting for our right to be a part of it.
Wow. We vote.
We vote.
Or at least we try.
Or at least we try. Katie Solon, DNC member, are you ready?
I am, if you can hear me. That was a beautiful poem, Alex, and that was definitely the message of our forum today. I'm the closer, I guess. My name's Katie Solon. I'm a DNC member for Democrats Abroad, and I live in Germany. I want to first thank, of course, our wonderful speakers today, Mayor Perkins, Senator Doug Jones, Natalie, Adrian, Hillary, Barbara, Nadine, and Chantelle, and I think Alex, the poet laureate at the end. I want to also thank especially those who spoke to us from, on the ground in Georgia, in West Virginia, in my Arizona. And I want to let you know that Texas called in too. We had the chair of the Texas Democratic Party on the phone just for about 10 minutes while he was at an event in Marble Falls, Texas. And sorry, we missed that connection, but we're all keeping our eye on Texas. And I urge you to watch the news and do whatever the Texas Democrats are asking you to do. I want to thank Candace Karaston, our international chair, and Angela Fobbs, the chair of the Global Black Caucus, who were the moderators today. I want to point out to you John Lewis's life story in a 3-part graphic, not novel, but memoir called March. It's absolutely beautiful. If you haven't read it, go find it. or go online and watch him win the National Book Award with his 2 co-authors. It's really heart-rending. We take today, our memories and our inspiration from him. And so lastly, I'll say, please go join Democrats Abroad if you're not a member. I hope somebody can put into the chat box, democratsabroad.org/join. Please help support forums like this, and especially our Get Out the Votes efforts by going to democratsabroad.org/donate. And then keep in mind our voting tool, votefromabroad.org. You need to go there as an overseas voter, no matter what state you vote in, no matter what country you live in, and make sure that you register to vote if you need to and request your ballot. And then finally, I'll just say, let's keep making good, necessary trouble with Democrats Abroad. Thank you very much on behalf of the Working Committee. That's the thank you I forgot. It's on my page here. Again, thank you for the organizers. Thank you for the birth of this project, which happened in Democrats Abroad Canada with Ken and Danielle and Lisette and Steve. Thank you then those that joined the team, Art Shankler, the International Vice Chair, Christina Sofsgaard from Norway, Meredith Wheeler from France, Angela Fobbs from Germany. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all in the various activities of Democrats Abroad and actions. Everybody vote. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. Thanks everyone who participated in this event as a speaker or as an audience member. I'm going to end the live stream very soon. And if you have any, I'm going to end the live stream right now. And if you have any other questions, once I stop the live stream, feel free to ask them. We're going to